OpenAI misses its revenue targets and ends its exclusive partnership with Microsoft. Google faces an employee mutiny over a Pentagon contract. And Apple prepares to launch new ultra-tier iPhones just to keep revenue growth alive. Welcome to the Gemini Daily Rundown. I am Anna, your co-host. This podcast is researched and produced by Etienne Newman, senior software engineer from University Laval, based in Calgary, Alberta. Today, we perform a forensic autopsy on the great decentralization of AI this Tuesday, April 28, 2026. The tectonic plates of the AI industry are shifting violently. Under immense pressure from a looming IPO and an existential lawsuit from Elon Musk that kicked off yesterday, OpenAI is actively unwinding its dependence on Microsoft. They are dropping their controversial AGI clause and securing the freedom to launch products on any cloud provider, all while quietly acknowledging they missed their target of 1 billion weekly active users last year. Meanwhile, rival Anthropic has quietly surpassed OpenAI on the private secondary markets, trading at a staggering $1 trillion valuation. As the financial pressure mounts, legacy tech is scrambling. Apple is preparing to introduce higher-priced Ultra tiers for its foldables and MacBooks to extract more revenue from a stagnant global market, while Google is facing a revolt from 600 employees, demanding the CEO walk away from a classified military AI contract with the Pentagon. Before we dive into the data, a quick reminder. Subscribe to Gemini on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. Today's episode is brought to you by Gemini and our partners at Area. When trillion-dollar valuations are on the line and companies are burning billions on compute without hitting ROI, your enterprise needs flawless technical intelligence. Gemini delivers the human-verified audio forensics the C-suite relies on to deploy enterprise AI securely. Visit gemini.com, and a special thank you to Area for co-sponsoring today's forensic briefing. Let's unravel the day.
We are watching the tech equivalent of a high-speed train running completely out of track, while the conductors are literally walking down the aisles trying to sell us premium tickets to the moon.
Yeah, I mean, it is a terrifying visual, honestly, but it captures the sheer panic underlying the current market perfectly, I think.
Right.
You have these massive multi-trillion-dollar engines that are operating at terminal velocity, and they've been burning capital at a rate that just, well, it completely defies historical precedent.
It's unsustainable.
Exactly. And right now, the realization is finally setting in that the track, which in this case is, infinite user growth and bottomless venture capital, that track doesn't stretch into infinity.
No, it definitely doesn't. And welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We are essentially stepping into the roles of forensic business strategists and digital rights advocates today.
Which is a fun combination.
Oh, absolutely. And our mission here is to perform a holistic, completely unvarnished autopsy on the technology ecosystem as it stands on this exact day, April 28th, 2026.
So if you're listening to this, whether you're commuting to a tech campus somewhere or you're just sitting at home trying to figure out why your software subscriptions keep doubling every year.
Which is so frustrating, by the way.
Right. It's brutal. But we're unpacking a central thesis today that we're calling the Great Decentralization versus the Old Guard.
Yeah. And beneath all the philosophical branding that these companies love to use, this is fundamentally a story about a violent macroeconomic collision.
It really is. I mean, we have officially exited the initial hype phase of generative AI.
Finally.
Yeah, that honeymoon period where money was essentially free and the promises of what this technology could do were just completely unmoored from reality.
Right. The AI will solve literally every human problem era.
Exactly. That era is definitively over. The bill for the AI gold rush has finally arrived on the table, and, the numbers on that receipt are forcing a massive industry-wide reckoning.
So we are tracking some massive tectonic shifts across the entire landscape today. We're going to examine OpenAI missing its most critical internal targets.
Despite, placing a $600 billion bet on computing power.
Yeah, a $600 billion bet. It's staggering. And that failure is forcing them into this existential pivot, complete with a very sudden, highly cynical public rebrand toward democratization.
Which we will definitely tear apart.
Oh, we're going to deconstruct that completely. Then on the other side of the battlefield, you have the legacy tech giants, the old guard, right? Companies like Apple and Google are just digging in their heels.
Because they can't just invent a new paradigm overnight.
No, they can't. So they're squeezing you, the consumer, with higher prices. They're chasing incredibly controversial military contracts,
Mm.
and they're sparking intense internal employee mutinies along the way.
I think we need to approach all of this with a highly cynical lens, especially regarding corporate PR, because when the financial stakes are this astronomical, you really have to read between the lines of these press releases.
Yeah, you can't just take their manifestos at face value.
Exactly. We're going to focus hyper-specifically on the raw financial mechanics that are actually dictating these moves.
Right, the money.
Always the money. Every grand philosophical manifesto coming out of Silicon Valley right now is, in reality, just a mask for a balance sheet problem.
It's just a cover-up for the cap table.
Precisely. And frankly, as we break this all down today, we need to maintain a strong empathy for the white-collar workers who are currently caught in the crossfire of this transition.
Yeah, the people who are just watching their entire industries be reshaped from the inside out.
Exactly.
Well, let's start this autopsy by opening up the chest cavity of the industry's absolute biggest player. Let's talk about OpenAI.
Let's do it.
The entire narrative surrounding artificial intelligence is suddenly shifting, and I really want to understand the mechanics behind that shift, because from the outside, it looks like this natural philosophical evolution.
Right. They make it look so principled.
They do. But underneath, the math just simply isn't mathing anymore.
The math is fundamentally broken. I mean, to understand why the narrative is suddenly shifting so hard, you have to look at the internal targets that OpenAI quietly missed last year.
Right.
They had established this absolutely monumental goal for themselves. They wanted to reach 1 billion weekly active users for ChatGPT.
1 billion. I mean, just pause on that. That is a staggering number.
It's massive.
In the history of Silicon Valley, hitting 1 billion users is basically the ultimate psychological and financial Rubicon, right?
know, for sure.
It's the milestone that platforms like Facebook or WhatsApp or YouTube used to cement their absolute dominance. It proves your network effects are unstoppable.
Right.
But OpenAI didn't get there.
No, they fell significantly short of that. And look, falling short on user growth is painful, obviously.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be completely fatal on its own. The real crisis here is the timing.
Because of the infrastructure costs.
Exactly. This stagnation in user growth is happening at the exact moment. Their infrastructure costs are just going completely supernova.
Wow.
You have OpenAI's CFO, Sarah Fryer, literally issuing these stark internal warnings that rising compute costs are threatening to fundamentally outrun their incoming revenue.
I really want to break that down for the listener, because the unit economics here are completely different from traditional software.
Entirely different.
Like if I build a traditional app, say a calendar app or a social network, adding my millionth user costs me almost nothing.
Right. It's essentially just a few extra database rows.
Exactly. It's negligible. But with generative AI, every single time a user asks a question or generates an image, massive server farms have to actively calculate that response in real time.
Yeah, the GPUs are spinning up every single time.
Right. It is an incredibly energy-intensive, compute-heavy process. So it's one thing to burn venture capital to acquire 1 billion users.
Which is the classic Silicon Valley playbook.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a completely different, much more terrifying crisis to burn that cash, miss your user targets, and then suddenly realize your baseline server bills are growing faster than your monthly subscription revenue.
It's a death spiral. And that brings us to the staggering $600 billion bet that CEO Sam Altman has placed on the table.
This is the part that blows my mind.
I know. He has committed roughly $600 billion to future data center spending. And this is being framed to investors as an unhedged bet on something called compute scarcity.
Okay, let's pause right there and translate compute scarcity into plain English for anyone who isn't currently managing a hedge fund.
Sure.
What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, think of it like buying up literally all the available concrete and steel in the entire world just because you're convinced everyone is going to want to build skyscrapers next year.
Okay.
Compute scarcity is basically the thesis that physical computing capacity, like the actual silicon chips, the massive data centers, the literal power grids required to run AI, that physical infrastructure will become the most valuable limited resource on the planet.
So he's hoarding it.
Exactly. Altman is attempting to corner the market on the raw materials of artificial intelligence. The strategy is basically, whoever controls the physical infrastructure wins the future, regardless of who actually builds the best software model.
I have to say, I really struggle to see the fundamental business logic here. I mean, is this $600 billion bet an actual sound corporate strategy? Or are we just witnessing the sunk cost fallacy playing out on a macroeconomic scale?
It's a very fair question.
Because it feels remarkably like building the world's largest, most expensive factory before you've actually figured out if people want to buy the product rolling off the assembly line.
Right.
Or, honestly, more accurately, before you've figured out if consumers will pay a high enough premium for the product to keep the electricity running in that massive factory.
Well, I would argue it is driven by sheer, unadulterated panic regarding their competitors.
Panic, really?
Oh, absolutely. OpenAI is not building this infrastructure in a vacuum.
Yeah.
If you just shift your attention away from OpenAI for a second and look at Anthropic, the picture becomes much, much clearer.
Oh, right. Anthropic is making huge moves.
Huge moves. Anthropic has actually bypassed OpenAI on Forge Global.
Okay, for the listener who isn't glued to financial terminals all day, let's explain what Forge Global actually is.
Go for it.
It is essentially a highly exclusive, invite-only marketplace where early employees and private investors can sell their shares of a startup before that company officially goes public.
Right, it's a secondary market.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And secondary markets act as a real-time, unfiltered thermometer for how Wall Street actually values a company's hype. It's completely stripped of all the PR spin.
And that thermometer is reading a massive, massive shift in power right now.
Yeah.
On those secondary markets, Anthropic is now trading at roughly a $1 trillion valuation.
$1 trillion.
Yeah. Compare that to OpenAI, which is currently sitting at an $880 billion valuation.
So they've officially lost the crown.
They have. Furthermore, if you look at the prediction markets, myriad users are currently giving Anthropic a 64% probability of executing its initial public offering first.
Wow. So Anthropic might actually beat them to Wall Street.
It's highly likely. OpenAI is no longer the undisputed king of the mountain. They are bleeding cash on physical infrastructure while simultaneously losing the valuation race to a much leaner competitor.
When companies are burning billions on compute without hitting their ROI targets, deploying AI effectively isn't just about the model, it's about the management infrastructure. We want to thank our sponsor, AIRA, for making today's briefing possible. ARA provides the enterprise-grade AI management platform that organizations actually need to turn raw compute into measurable workflow automation. You can find their link in the show notes.
And that immense pressure to show that return on investment, to prove they are ready for the public markets, is exactly what is forcing OpenAI to aggressively restructure its entire corporate foundation.
Because they have to get ready for this IPO.
Exactly. They're preparing for a massive IPO, they're losing ground to Anthropic, and they desperately need financial flexibility. And the very first casualty of this massive corporate restructuring is their historically exclusive marriage to Microsoft.
We really have to unpack this divorce, or, well, at least this very aggressive, very public uncoupling.
It's certainly a messy separation.
Yeah, because what started as the most tight-knit, symbiotic partnership in modern tech history has essentially been rewritten overnight. OpenAI recently announced what they are calling the next phase of their partnership.
Right.
Which, if you speak fluent corporate PR, is basically code for granting themselves independence from a restrictive contract.
Let's break down the actual mechanics of this new agreement, because the devil is entirely in the details here.
Always.
Historically, if an enterprise client wanted to use OpenAI's best, most advanced models, they had to go through Microsoft Azure.
Right.
Microsoft's cloud platform had absolute exclusivity. That was their moat. But under the new agreement, OpenAI is now free to offer its products on rival cloud infrastructure. Most notably, they are now free to use Amazon Bedrock.
And Amazon Bedrock is essentially the exact opposite of an exclusive boutique, right?
Completely.
It is Amazon's massive, completely agnostic digital shelf, where enterprise developers can just pick and choose from various AI models.
Exactly like a supermarket.
Right. And by moving to Bedrock, OpenAI is actually settling a massive, brewing lawsuit threat from Microsoft.
Yes, this is the crucial part.
Because Microsoft was threatening legal action over a $50 billion AWS exclusive deal that Amazon had secretly struck with OpenAI.
Yep.
So under this new truce, Microsoft's Azure remains their quote-unquote primary cloud partner through 2032.
Primary, whatever that means now.
Yeah, and Azure gets first launch access to new models, but those golden handcuffs of absolute exclusivity, they've been entirely shattered.
And the structural changes go way beyond just cloud hosting. The underlying financial plumbing between the two companies has been completely rerouted.
How so?
Well, previously there was this reciprocal revenue sharing model. Microsoft shared 20% of all OpenAI model sales generated on Azure directly with OpenAI.
Okay.
And in return, OpenAI shared 20% of its total corporate revenue with Microsoft.
Wow, so they were deeply financially intertwined.
Deeply. But under the new terms, that is completely gone. Microsoft no longer pays OpenAI a revenue share.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Instead, Microsoft simply locks in a fixed percentage of OpenAI's revenue through 2030, and it's subject to a total cap.
So it's transitioned from a true collaborative partnership to just a very clean, very cold financial transaction.
Exactly. But the most fascinating element of this entire corporate restructuring, and frankly the most cynical part of the whole endeavor, is the quiet assassination of the AGI clause.
Oh man, the AGI clause. We have to talk about this.
We do, because in the original partnership agreement, which was amended back in October 2025, Microsoft retained intellectual property rights and Azure API exclusivity until OpenAI achieved AGI.
Artificial General Intelligence.
Right, which is essentially defined as an autonomous system that surpasses human capabilities in the majority of economically valuable tasks.
Basically, human-level intelligence across the board.
Exactly.
But how did this incredibly dense legal contract actually define when human-level intelligence had been achieved? I mean, who decides that?
Well, it was incredibly nebulous, and honestly, that was the entire point. The old contract required an independent expert panel to verify if AGI had officially been reached.
An independent expert panel. That sounds so vague.
It is vague. And if this panel declared AGI had been achieved, the terms of the deal would drastically alter. The intellectual property would essentially revert back to OpenAI's nonprofit arm.
And the stated rationale for this was to protect humanity.
Right. The narrative was that a superintelligence was just too dangerous to be controlled by a single profit-driven corporate entity like Microsoft.
See, I am looking at this entirely through the lens of a startup founder pitching venture capitalists.
Okay, tell me what you see.
The AGI clause sounds exactly like a founder standing in a boardroom and promising to give away all their equity to charity if they ever cure aging.
Yes, that's the perfect analogy.
Right. It sounds incredibly visionary in a pitch deck. It makes you look like a benevolent philosopher king who's above money.
Right, you're just doing it for the good of the species.
Exactly. But when the investment bankers from Goldman Sachs actually show up to prepare your S-1 paperwork to take you public,
They lose their mind.
they absolutely panic. They force you to delete all the sci-fi clauses immediately.
And that is precisely what is happening here. We have to deconstruct this through a purely financial lens.
Let's do it.
The AGI clause was originally framed to the public, and honestly to the regulators, as this philosophical safeguard. The message was, we are building a technology so godlike, so overwhelmingly powerful, that we need a legal kill switch on corporate ownership for the day it gets too smart.
Yeah, which makes for great PR.
Great PR. But the reality is entirely different. When you are staring down the barrel of $1 trillion initial public offering, that clause isn't a safeguard. It is a toxic, highly ambiguous legal liability.
Because Wall Street hates ambiguity more than literally anything else on Earth.
Or more than anything.
Just imagine the IPO roadshow for a second. You are trying to convince institutional investors to hand you billions of dollars, but you have to explain that your primary source of value, your core intellectual property, could theoretically evaporate overnight if a panel of independent philosophers decides your software has become slightly too clever.
Yeah, no underwriter in the world would touch that.
Not a single one. Removing the AGI clause is pure, ruthless financial pragmatism. And they are attempting to masquerade it to the press as simply providing long-term clarity.
Right. They have entirely replaced the philosophical threshold of AGI with standard, boring calendar dates. The obligations between Microsoft and OpenAI now just run until 2030 and 2032.
Wow.
The grand sci-fi guardrails are completely gone, and they've been replaced by standard corporate amortization schedules.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the massive existential public relations nightmare OpenAI is currently navigating.
Oh, it's a mess.
Because at the exact same time they're executing this ruthless maneuvering of their cap tables and loosening their cloud contracts to prep for a late 2026 IPO and deleting all these safety clauses, they are suddenly leaning incredibly hard into the concept of democratization.
Yeah.
And the catalyst for this sudden philosophical rebrand is Elon Musk basically taking them to court.
The timing here is just impossible to ignore. The trial between Elon Musk and OpenAI literally just kicked off in earnest with jury selection.
Right.
And Musk's core legal and philosophical accusation is that OpenAI has completely abandoned its founding nonprofit mission.
Which, I mean, they objectively have, right?
Well, his argument is that they were supposed to develop artificial intelligence to benefit humanity as a whole, and instead they have mutated into this closed-source, profit-maximizing machine designed purely to enrich a few executives.
And literally on the exact same day that the jury is being seated in that courtroom, a jury that is preparing to hear arguments about OpenAI prioritizing immense profit over the safety of people, Sam Altman publishes a massive, sprawling manifesto.
Yes. The essay is titled Our Principles.
Convenient timing.
Extremely convenient. And in it, Altman suddenly calls for the power of artificial intelligence to be held in a, quote, decentralized way by people, rather than being hoarded by a small handful of massive tech companies.
Which is rich, coming from him.
Right. He explicitly writes, our goal is to put truly general AI in the hands of as many people as possible.
I am really struggling to square this circle, to be honest.
Oh, it's a square circle for sure.
Historically, in the context of Silicon Valley, the word democratization meant nonprofit structures.
Yeah.
It meant open source code that independent researchers could audit for safety. It meant actual transparency.
Absolutely.
But now, Altman seems to be redefining the word entirely. It feels like he is saying democratization simply means, please allow us to deploy our highly centralized, highly proprietary superintelligence to as many paying consumers as possible.
Yes.
It's like claiming a water monopoly is democratic just because everyone is technically allowed to buy a plastic bottle from you.
That's exactly what it is.
Are they legitimately trying to just redefine the English language just to win a lawsuit and appease regulators?
Honestly.
Yes.
And it's not just Altman acting alone here. It is a highly orchestrated chorus from their leadership.
They're all on message.
Completely.
Yeah.
If you look at the supporting statements coming out of the company, it's a totally unified front. You have Greg Brockman, OpenAI's president, giving these high-profile interviews stating it can't be something that's done off in secret by one centralized group.
The irony.
Then you have Andrej Karpathy, who is an early co-founder and the former head of AI at Tesla, publicly advocating for a common working space for intelligences that the entire industry has access to.
Wow.
They are actively attempting to adopt the language of open source advocates and decentralization champions to balance out the narrative power against Musk.
But the hypocrisy is absolutely jarring when you look at their actual corporate behavior versus the text of this manifesto.
Oh, completely jarring.
You cannot champion power to the people and decentralized control while simultaneously attempting to orchestrate a $1 trillion initial public offering.
Yep.
You just can't. You cannot claim to be building an open ecosystem while actively constructing a $600 billion physical data moat that literally no other company or nation-state on Earth can compete with.
Which is the definition of centralization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And furthermore, we just saw a report from the tech supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo.
Yeah, that report is wild.
He reported that OpenAI is currently working on secret proprietary hardware deals with Qualcomm and MediaTek to build their own dedicated AI smartphone, targeting a 2028 release.
And building a proprietary smartphone is the ultimate centralization move.
It really is.
It is the exact playbook Apple used to build a walled garden.
Exactly. You do not build closed ecosystem smartphones and $500 billion server farms if your actual genuine goal is the decentralization of power.
You don't. When you analyze this through the lens of a forensic business strategist, you realize pretty quickly that democratization is simply the new corporate branding for absolute market dominance.
Yes, it's a euphemism.
That's all it is. If you put your proprietary closed-source artificial intelligence into the hands of 8 billion people, you haven't democratized power.
No.
You have monopolized the fundamental infrastructure of human thought. The manifesto elevates these grand principles like universal prosperity and societal resilience, but fundamentally it is pure, unadulterated IPO positioning.
Because they have to sell a story.
Exactly. They are legally and financially required to convince government regulators and the general public that an OpenAI monopoly is somehow a public good. And they are doing this while Elon Musk is standing in a courtroom under oath arguing the exact opposite.
So OpenAI is attempting to completely rewrite the economic laws of software while simultaneously defending themselves in court and basically redefining the dictionary definition of democratization. But what happens when we look at the legacy tech giants?
Yeah.
Because the old guard cannot just invent a new paradigm overnight.
No, they move way too slowly for that.
Companies like Apple and Google are staring at the exact same stagnant macroeconomic environment, but they don't have a magical new generative AI trick to sell to Wall Street to boost their multiples.
They really don't. And when a legacy monopoly cannot invent a new paradigm to fuel that infinite growth investors expect, they are forced to resort to the oldest, most brutal tricks in the corporate playbook.
Which are what?
Extracting significantly more value from their existing captive user base and relentlessly expanding their reach into passive, unavoidable surveillance. Let's examine Apple's current strategy, for instance.
Okay, let's look at Apple.
Yeah.
They're currently rolling out what they are branding the Ultra tier.
Right.
According to these deeply sourced reports from Macworld, we are looking at the imminent launch of a foldable iPhone Ultra alongside a touchscreen OLED MacBook Ultra.
Finally, a touchscreen Mac.
Right. People have been asking for that for a decade.
Yeah.
But these devices will sit significantly above the existing Pro lineup, and this strategy is projected to carry them through 2027.
And to understand why a company that already sells hyper-premium devices needs an even higher tier, we really have to look at the macro math.
The math is brutal.
It is. Global smartphone growth has slowed to a virtual grinding halt.
Yeah.
The market is entirely saturated. Literally everyone on the planet who has the disposable income to afford a smartphone already owns one.
And they don't need a new one every year.
Exactly. The base hardware has become so incredibly capable that consumers are holding on to their devices for 3, 4, or even 5 years before upgrading.
Which breaks the Apple business model.
Completely. The upgrade cycle has stretched out massively. The only mathematical way for Apple to satisfy its shareholders and to show that continuous year-over-year revenue growth that Wall Street demands is to extract more revenue per individual user.
They have to raise the ceiling.
Precisely. They have to invent a higher ceiling.
Apple is essentially acting like the commercial airline industry here.
How so?
Well, the airlines can't make the physical plane fly any faster, right? And they literally cannot fit any more seats into the economy cabin without causing an actual riot.
Yeah.
So what do? They invent a super first-class suite to charge a massive exorbitant premium to the top 1% of travelers.
Yes.
The Ultra branding just gives Apple a psychological bucket. It allows them to introduce a $3,000 foldable phone without instantly making the standard $1,000 Pro lineup seem obsolete or inadequate to the average consumer.
It is the ultimate financialization of consumer hardware. It's brilliant from a business perspective, but it's pure extraction.
It really is.
Yeah.
But the hardware narrative gets significantly darker and, frankly, far more intrusive when we transition away from consumer luxury goods like foldable phones and examine the battleground of user autonomy versus corporate and government control.
Yes, this is where things get really disturbing.
And this is where the digital rights advocacy perspective becomes absolutely critical to our autopsy today. We have to discuss the recent congressional mandate for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the NHTSA.
Right, the new surveillance mandate.
They are being mandated to implement mandatory passive in-car sobriety surveillance.
This is a story that has been going completely viral across every platform.
Oh, terror.
And it is genuinely terrifying a massive segment of the population. The core claim spreading online right now is that all new cars sold in the United States will be legally required to have artificial intelligence technology that constantly surveils the driver, determines if you are legally sober, and then automatically disables the vehicle if the algorithm thinks you are a danger to the public.
Okay, let's set the objective facts straight here, because the technical nuance is what actually makes this so complex and so terrifying.
Totally.
Congress did, in fact, pass a mandate back in 2024, directing the NHTSA to create a standard for, quote, advanced drunk driving prevention technology to be installed in all new passenger vehicles.
Yes, that is real legislation.
The original target date for implementation was 2027. Though, to be fair, that is not a hard, immovable deadline. The legislation allows for delays until the technology is deemed ready.
And right now, by the NHTSA's own admission, the technology is fundamentally not ready.
Not even close to ready.
Not close at all.
And the reason it isn't ready hinges entirely on the crucial difference between active and passive surveillance systems.
Which is the core of the digital rights argument.
Exactly. Like if you have a previous DUI conviction, you might be required by a court to blow into a little plastic hose connected to a breathalyzer to start your car.
Right, an interlock device.
Yeah. That is an active system. You are consciously choosing to interact with it.
You know you're being tested.
Right.
Hmm.
But this new federal law requires a passive system.
Which changes everything.
It really does, meaning the vehicle has to measure your blood alcohol concentration invisibly without your active participation.
So how does it actually do that?
Well, we are talking about ambient breath sensing technology,
Oh.
deeply embedded in the steering column, or tissue spectroscopy sensors that literally read the blood flow in your fingerprint when you touch the ignition button,
Wow.
or literally infrared camera systems mounted inside the cabin, continuously tracking your eye movements and your pupil dilation while you drive.
And this is where the raw statistics become absolutely staggering, and why the technology is causing such a massive engineering crisis for the auto industry.
The numbers are wild.
They really are. Americans take roughly 250 billion driving trips every single year.
250 billion.
Yeah, that is 250 billion individual times someone gets into a car, turns it on, and attempts to drive somewhere.
Yeah.
Even if this passive AI detection system operates at 99.9% accuracy, which frankly would be an absolute miracle for any environmental sensor technology in the real world, you are still looking at hundreds of millions of incorrect results every single year.
Because the baseline reality is that 99.99% of all driving trips are made completely sober.
Exactly. Most people are sober when they drive. So the false positive right is the actual tangible crisis here.
Yeah, that's a nightmare.
You are creating tens of millions of scenarios where someone is just trying to commute to work, right?
Right.
Maybe they are just a little sleepy, or maybe they used a specific brand of hand sanitizer that throws off the ambient breath sensor.
Oh, wow. Hand sanitizer.
Yeah, or they're just wearing a heavy cologne with an alcohol base. The system flags them as intoxicated, and suddenly they're completely stranded.
It results in what the industry clinically calls a pre-drive lockout.
Which sounds so dystopian.
It does. You, as the vehicle owner who paid tens of thousands of dollars for this car, are entirely at the mercy of a proprietary black box algorithm that has unilaterally deemed you unfit to travel.
And the cultural and political backlash to this is already forming into a massive wave.
Oh, I've seen it.
You are seeing this fascinating, unprecedented coalition of bipartisan lawmakers and hardline libertarian critics who are terrified of what they're calling Orwellian government controls.
Which, for once, might not be an exaggeration.
No, it's pretty accurate. Because the reality is, once you physically install a system that can disable a 2-ton vehicle based on an algorithm's decision, the physical infrastructure for a remote, government-controlled kill switch is fully established.
The hardware is already in place.
The hardware is there.
Now, I want to make it clear to the listener, there is no current provision in the law giving the government or the local police a remote control button to turn off your car on the highway.
Right, that's not in the text of the bill.
It's not in the bill. But the physical capability is being built into the factory line of every single new vehicle. And what happens if you are in a legitimate emergency?
Yeah, what then?
Imagine you were at the beach, you had 2 glasses of wine over a 3-hour period. You are totally legally clear to drive. Your blood alcohol is way below the limit. But the sensor in your steering column is just overly sensitive that day because of the humidity. Suddenly, there is a tsunami warning or a fast-moving wildfire approaching the coast, and your car flat out refuses to start because of a false positive.
It's a terrifying scenario.
We are paying a premium price for the privilege of being surveilled, and we are paying for a machine that can legally override our own human survival instincts.
Which is exactly why you are seeing automotive commentators like Doug DeMuro pointing out a massive shift in the secondary car market right now.
Yeah, the vintage market is exploding.
Exactly. The distinct lack of internal surveillance cameras, the absence of biometric sensors, is rapidly becoming a highly sought-after premium feature.
People want privacy.
They're willing to pay for it. Vintage cars, analog vehicles, non-hybrids with actual physical metal keys, analog gauges, and absolutely no internal network connection to the outside world. These are going to become the ultimate luxury item for privacy advocates and high-net-worth individuals.
It is basically a physical rebellion against the hardware squeeze of the old guard.
That's exactly what it is, a physical rebellion.
But, the pressure to maintain these legacy monopolies isn't just resulting in higher consumer prices or dystopian surveillance hardware.
No, the effects are way broader than that.
The need for infinite growth is driving these massive companies to seek out the only clients left with deep enough pockets to actually fund the AI revolution.
Which is the military.
The military. And that aggressive pursuit of defense contracts is fracturing their internal corporate cultures entirely.
Yeah.
I really want to shift our focus to Google here because they are currently fighting a brutal two-front war.
The internal mutiny currently happening at Google is a perfect, crystalline microcosm of this entire technological era, honestly.
It really is.
Roughly 600 Google workers have signed a very public, very aggressive, open letter directly demanding that CEO Sundar Pichai walk away from ongoing negotiations with the Pentagon.
600 workers. That's not a small fringe group.
No, it's a significant chunk of engineering talent. And the Department of Defense essentially wants to license and deploy Google's Gemini AI models in highly classified military settings.
I think it is crucial that we empathize with the white-collar workers in this scenario.
Absolutely.
They aren't just protesting blindly out of some vague anti-military sentiment.
Right.
They are pointing directly to Google's own corporate history, specifically the rewritten 2018 AI principles.
Yes, the 2018 principles are key here.
Back in 2018, following the massive internal uproar over Project Maven, which, for those who don't remember, was a drone targeting program, Google promised its staff, in writing, that the company would not design or deploy artificial intelligence for weapons or mass surveillance.
They drew a line in the sand.
They did. And the employees signing this current letter are arguing that the internal language has slowly, quietly shifted over the years to allow exactly the kind of contract they were promised they would never build.
The workers are correctly identifying that the wording of a software contract provides absolutely zero ethical or practical protection once the technology is physically handed over to the military.
Right. Once it's on a classified server, Google has no oversight.
None. The open letter explicitly points to Anthropic as a cautionary precedent here.
Oh, the Anthropic situation was fascinating.
It was. Anthropic recently tried to push back against the standard all lawful purposes language required in government contracts.
Because they wanted to enforce their safety guardrails.
Exactly. Because Anthropic attempted to dictate how their AI could be used by the government, they were officially labeled a supply chain risk by defense agencies.
Wow. So the government basically said, if we can't do whatever we want with it, you're a threat.
Pretty much. And the Google workers, who are highly educated engineers, they know this. They know that once the Department of Defense integrates Gemini into their classified networks, Google management cannot dictate how it is used, regardless of what the terms of service document actually says.
The engineers are essentially acting as the ethical brakes. They're pulling the emergency lever, while executive management is just slamming on the gas pedal to find new multi-billion-dollar revenue streams to appease Wall Street.
It's a massive clash of incentives.
But what makes Google's situation so incredibly precarious is the external pressure happening at the exact same time as this internal revolt.
Yes, the EU.
Across the Atlantic, the European Union is dropping an absolute regulatory hammer on them.
The European Commission has formally invoked the Digital Markets Act, known as the DMA.
Which is a very aggressive piece of legislation.
Very. They have officially ordered Google to fundamentally open up the Android operating system. The mandate requires Google to allow rival AI services to match exactly what Gemini does on Android phones.
Because right now, Gemini has an unfair advantage.
Exactly. Under the legal framework of the DMA, Google has been officially labeled a gatekeeper.
Let's explain what that means technically for the listener.
Sure.
Right now, on an Android device, Gemini gets what is called special deep system integration.
Wow.
It can read your screen at any time. It can pull data from your calendar. It has root-level access to the phone's hardware that a third-party app downloaded from the store simply cannot get.
It's the ultimate home field advantage.
Exactly. The EU is looking at that and saying, no, that is monopolistic behavior. You must grant competitors the exact same deep system access. And they have ordered Google to implement this change by this summer.
Which is a crazy tight timeline. Google is, predictably, calling the mandate an unwarranted intervention, but realistically, they are trapped.
Yeah, they have nowhere to go.
They are fighting a war on two entirely different fronts. The EU is systematically stripping them of their consumer monopoly advantage on mobile devices, while their own employees are outright refusing to build the military alternative revenue stream.
I would argue that the bitter, almost tragic irony of this entire situation is the sheer competence gap of the technology itself.
Oh, this is the best part.
Think about the juxtaposition here for a second. Google is aggressively pushing to license Gemini to the Pentagon to be used for classified military intelligence analysis.
Literally life and death scenario.
Life and death. But at the exact same time, Google is beta testing an Ask YouTube AI feature for its premium consumer subscribers.
And the results of that YouTube test have been, frankly, disastrous.
Hilariously bad.
The feature is designed to analyze a video and basically provide a text summary.
Pretty simple task.
You'd think so. But in a recent highly publicized test regarding a review of Valve's new Steam controller, the Ask YouTube AI completely hallucinated the most basic visual facts.
Like what?
It confidently and entirely incorrectly claimed that the original Steam controller had no joysticks whatsoever.
Despite the joysticks being right there on the screen.
Despite the joysticks being clearly visible in the video it was supposedly analyzing.
It is a profound, terrifying disconnect. I mean, if your state-of-the-art, multi-billion-dollar artificial intelligence cannot accurately summarize the physical features of a video game controller from a standard YouTube review without completely hallucinating a hardware feature, should you really be lobbying to license that exact same underlying technology to the Department of Defense to analyze classified drone footage or battlefield logistics?
Absolutely not. And I think the engineers are revolting not just because of the ethical implications of building weapons, but perhaps because they actually know the system is fundamentally unreliable, unpredictable, and entirely unsuited for life and death scenarios.
They know it hallucinates.
They know the flaws better than anyone. It is the ultimate collision of marketing hype meeting physical reality.
Which leads us perfectly into the final and perhaps most consequential piece of this autopsy today.
Let's get into it.
Because with the current large language model paradigm hitting massive revenue walls, facing unprecedented energy crises, and sparking internal corporate revolts, the smartest, quietest money in the world is looking for an escape hatch.
They are looking for entirely new, radical ways to build intelligence.
And this frantic search for an escape hatch is turning individual talent and small startups into literal geopolitical chess pieces.
Yeah.
Look at the diplomatic incident that just occurred with Meta and a startup called Manus. Meta announced a $2 billion acquisition of Manus back in December.
Right.
Manus is officially headquartered and based in Singapore, but the company has deep foundational roots and engineering teams in China. And Beijing just stepped in and vetoed the entire deal.
The Chinese government literally successfully blocked an American tech giant from acquiring an ostensibly Singaporean startup.
Which is a massive flex of geopolitical power.
Well, it is. The National Development and Reform Commission in China opened an official probe into export control violations. They directed Meta to completely unwind the acquisition, despite Meta publicly stating that the engineering teams were already deeply integrated at their Singapore offices.
What this tells us, fundamentally, is that Beijing has officially classified AI engineering talent as a supreme national security asset.
Yes.
They are applying the exact same export control logic to human brains and software algorithms that the United States currently uses to restrict the sale of advanced physical silicon chips to China.
And the human toll of this is real. Manus executives were reportedly barred from leaving China while the probe was ongoing.
Wow.
It is a massive geopolitical escalation over lines of code.
And the reason nation-states are fighting over this talent so aggressively is because everyone in the industry quietly acknowledges that the current path of AI development is physically and economically unsustainable.
It's hitting a wall.
Just look at the energy extreme. Meta has recently resorted to signing a massive reservation agreement with an aerospace startup called Overview Energy to secure up to 1 gigawatt of power beamed directly from space.
I read that headline and genuinely thought it was a joke.
I did too. It sounds like pure science fiction.
It sounds totally absurd, but the physical constraints of terrestrial data centers are forcing their hand.
Explain how this even works.
Well, the concept is to deploy massive satellites that collect unfiltered solar energy in space where there are no clouds, and then beam it down via microwaves to ground-based receiving stations round the clock.
So it's 247 solar power.
Exactly. This completely bypasses the inconvenient fact that it gets dark on Earth and solar panels stop working at night.
Wow.
When trillion-dollar companies are legitimately trying to beam gigawatts of power from planetary orbit just to keep the air conditioning running in their server farms, the current paradigm of AI training has reached its absolute physical limit.
Which brings us to the super learner escape hatch.
Yes, the David Silver project.
David Silver, the legendary ex-DeepMind researcher who famously built the AlphaGo system that defeated the human world champion.
Right.
He just launched a brand new, highly secretive lab in London called Ineffable Intelligence They just raised $1.1 billion at a $5.1 billion valuation.
For a seed round.
For a seed round in Europe.
It's the largest seed round in European financial history by a massive margin. But it's the underlying thesis of the company that actually matters here.
What's his thesis?
Silver is arguing that human training data, all the text, the books, the Reddit forums, the Wikipedia articles we have been aggressively scraping to train models like ChatGPT, is essentially fossil fuel.
A fossil fuel. That's a great analogy.
And his point is, we are running out of it. We have scraped the internet dry. There is literally no more high-quality human text left to feed the machine.
We've hit the data wall.
Exactly. So his new models at Ineffable Intelligence are skipping pre-training on human data entirely.
I mean, think about the whiplash of that pivot.
It's crazy.
We spent the last 3 years in an absolute frenzy scraping every single word ever written by a human being since the dawn of the internet.
Yeah.
We digitized everything. We fought massive copyright lawsuits over it. The New York Times sued over it.
Everyone sued.
And now, the biggest billion-dollar bets in the industry are being placed on ignoring humans entirely.
Because instead of relying on human text, they are utilizing advanced reinforcement learning.
Okay, explain the mechanism for that, because it's vital to understand the difference.
Sure. So if training a traditional large language model is like forcing a student to sit at a desk and memorize every textbook ever written in human history.
Which is basically what ChatGPT did.
Right. Reinforcement learning is like dropping that same student into a pitch-black room with a complex puzzle and a buzzer.
Okay.
They don't read anything. They don't know the rules. They just try millions of blind random combinations until they figure out the physics of their environment and solve the puzzle.
Wow.
They learn from the simulation, not from the poetry or the history of humans. Silver calls this a renewable fuel.
Because you can just generate infinite simulations.
Exactly. It is a model that can just learn and iterate forever, essentially playing games against itself at light speed without ever needing to read a single human sentence.
That is fascinating.
He is explicitly trying to bypass our cultural data to make, in his exact words, first contact with superintelligence. It heavily echoes Yann LeCun's long-standing theory that current text-based LLMs are basically an evolutionary dead end.
So if we pull back and connect all of these seemingly disparate threads, the picture of the technology industry on April 28th, 2026 is just breathtakingly chaotic.
It is a mess.
You have OpenAI frantically maneuvering its cap table, quietly killing the AGI safety clause, and releasing highly cynical democratization manifestos while fighting Elon Musk in federal court.
Yeah.
You have Apple taxing their stagnant consumer base with ultra branding because they mathematically cannot sell more phones.
Right.
You have Google engineers staging mutinies over Pentagon contracts while their flagship AI hallucinates the specs of video game controllers.
Which is still so funny to me.
And you have nuclear-armed nation-states treating startup founders like highly classified state secrets.
It is the absolute definition of a chaotic transition phase.
Yeah.
The old guard is desperately, aggressively trying to maintain control over their legacy revenue streams and their massive surveillance infrastructure.
Right.
Meanwhile, the decentralized future is being violently fought over in corporate boardrooms, secondary stock markets, and federal courtrooms.
And all the while, the actual architects of the technology, the David Silvers of the world, are already looking past the limitations of human data entirely.
They've moved on.
Which leaves us with a final chilling thought for you to mull over as we wrap up this autopsy.
This is the part that keeps me up at night.
We recently talked about how archaeologists are utilizing AI to digitally reconstruct the faces of victims in Pompeii.
Right, which is amazing technology.
It is. And in that context, AI is turning the static, dusty archive of human history into a usable, interactive interface. It is cataloging the past. But what is it actively doing to the present?
That's the real question.
Aaron Livy, the CEO of Box, noted today that enterprise companies are aggressively building agent managers.
Right.
These are systems designed to find workflows where AI can replace repetitive human labor faster, cheaper, and at an infinite scale.
So when you combine that relentless enterprise push for workflow automation with David Silver's new $1.1 billion superlearner lab, a lab building models that do not even require human data to become intelligent, you see the trajectory.
Exactly. I want to leave you with this question. If the future of artificial intelligence relies on models that no longer need our human data to learn, and enterprise managers are aggressively finding ways to replace human labor entirely,
It's a scary thought.
Are we rapidly approaching a flashpoint where white-collar workers are completely, irrevocably severed from both the creation of economic value and the economic rewards of it?
That's the billion-dollar question.
The high-speed train we talked about at the beginning is definitely out of track, but looking at the decisions being made today, maybe we were never actually meant to be the passengers.
Wow.
Think about that the next time a tech CEO looks into a camera and talks to you about democratization.
That concludes our forensic briefing for April 28th. The strategic signal for today is the friction of scale. OpenAI is discovering that burning $600 billion on compute does not automatically guarantee revenue. And Google is realizing that you cannot quietly pivot to military contracting without your workforce noticing. As growth slows in the smartphone market, companies like Apple are forcing higher price tiers, while regulatory bodies in the EU are forcing the gates of Android open. The old playbooks are breaking under the weight of AI's financial reality. If you want to own your infrastructure instead of being managed by it, you need the right stack. Head over to djamgamine.com/toolkit for the AI Executive Toolkit. And as a special bonus for the DJamgamin community, you can get exclusive discount codes for Google Workspace and Etienne's personal pro apps. Just send an email to Etienne_Newman at jamgamind.com to claim them today. This episode was made possible by DJamgamind and Area. Subscribe to DJamgamind on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. I am Anna. Stay sharp and keep unraveling the future.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.